Hello. That camera needs to go up. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Powerhouse Fence Show. I'm Dan Turbyville. I'm the host. Keep on. There we go. And this is Powerhouse Fence Show. Sorry. But it just fell right back to the same place. There we go. Now you can see me. Sorry about that. So this week we're going to kind of do a super brief recap on some of the financial fundamentals that we've talked about in the weeks leading up to this. If you missed that, you can go back, and there are two episodes before the episode with Craig Eubanks last week that we kind of get into the basics of financials and kind of start going through that stuff. So if you want to get caught up, there you go. But yeah, so we're going to do a real brief recap of that. That stupid camera still has a square on my face too. And we're not going to go all the way over all of that and dive down deep into it again or anything like that, but we'll just kind of touch on it. And then we're going to tie that into running our business. So what does all of that mean? How do we look at it? How do we know what's going on? And what does it do for us? And then we're going to talk about how we use it to bid jobs. So that's what you have in store, and it's going to be great. All right. So the show's presented by Memphis Fence Company, MFC Manufacturing, Simpalo, and we have a few partners listed up on one of these sides up here. We have the Thornton Fence Consulting Group. They do consulting, and Tony does a bunch of events around the country throughout the course of the year. Definitely suggest getting to one of those. If you've never been, it's worth checking out. He's got a couple books out. I think he's up to like 50 years in the fence industry or something like that. So guy knows what he's talking about. We have Fence News. We like them. They put out the publication with Pete and Jake, the giant like newspaper size magazine. So if you want to stay up to date on what's going on, and actually I think that thing is free. I don't think you have to pay for it. I think you just go sign up. And then EZG Manufacturing, they make the big orange machines. If you've ever been to a trade show, you've seen them there. Fence hog, things like that. So we like their equipment, so we stick them on here. JC Gurry says hello. Thanks for stopping by. Good to see you. Yeah, so we are live. There is a phone number scrolling on the bottom of the screen, 901-878-4987. 901-878-4987. And you can also use that phone number anytime you'd like, and you can get in touch with me. And if you got questions or anything, let me know. Happy to help however I can. So thank you, everyone, for listening. We do it for you. Thanks for stopping by. Here's what I ask. I've got a few things I'm going to ask of you this week, actually. One, I ask you, maybe share the show with someone who might benefit from hearing some of the things that we talk about. So you could do that. You also could, give us a like, review, rating, whatever kind of thing, depending on what platform you're listening to. That would be cool too. But the big thing is share it with somebody who needs it. That's the reason we're here, right? Is to try to share it with other people and try to share the experience and the things that we've learned in our years of doing this. And the only way we can get that out to people is with your help. So if you want to see somebody on the show, if you want to be on the show, Isaac Alexander, if you want to be on the show, Mark Cobb, if you want to be on the show, let us know. We'd be happy to have you on here. And the same thing I tell everybody is nobody's coming on here and doing a commercial for an hour. But we will, talk about what you do and kind of tell your story. I like telling people's stories, right? And so that would definitely be a thing that we could do, and then pick your brain about how we can all be a little bit better. But yeah, if you want us to try to track down somebody to bring on the show, let us know. Or if you have ideas of things you'd like to hear us talk about, any of those. So we have officially kicked off our fundraiser with Make-A-Wish. The lady was here last week, right? Yeah, so she was here last week, and she gave us a presentation, played some of those, sad videos with somebody singing in the background. I can't remember who sings those songs in the like, and there's those commercials with like puppies or something like that. And they have like Sarah McLaughlin or somebody singing. Yeah. No, but for real, she had a couple of videos that she played, and she kind of talked about Make a Wish and what they do, and talked about how many kids. Like, so right now there's, I think, 58 or 59 Make a Wish chapters in the U.S. The one that's in Memphis has 370 kids that are waiting on a wish or have been referred to receive a wish. And I think their goal is to try to do 300 this year, which is a little bit more than what they did last year. And so what we've done is we've committed to grant one wish ourselves. And so we're ponying up to do one wish, and we have launched a fundraiser, and we're trying to help generate some money to grant another wish. So here's my second thing that I ask of you is if you are in a position where you can do so safely and you have $1 to spare, click on the link in the description and donate that dollar to Make a Wish. It goes straight to them, doesn't go to us. We can't do anything with it. And it's going to help them to grant a wish and do something for a child. Can't remember the children don't have to be terminally ill, but I think they have to have like a life altering condition or disease or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So they don't have to be, they're not all terminally ill, right? They all have some diagnosis with some disease or, some kind of ailment that alters their life. And to me, I think this is a really great cause. If you have kids, then it kind of changes your perspective on things. I think it's a really great cause. I think that being able to put a little bit of positivity into some kid's life that is facing something that's probably pretty terrible, I think is a big deal. So Josh asked, "What's the wish?" We don't know. It's not how it works. They don't send us a bunch of kids and we pick one and go with that. What happens is we commit to fund a wish, and then we do, pay them to fund the wish. And once that happens, then they'll like, we are going to have a wish celebration is what they call it. And so we'll have some sort of party, and we'll bring all the people on our team will be invited to that. And it'll just give us a chance to meet the family and meet the kid and kind of talk to them about what they're going to do and all of that. And so that'll kind of happen after or later down the road, right? Because there's a lot of the kids that they can't do that, right? They might be like immune compromised or something like that, and so they actually can't be a part of those type of wish celebrations and things as well. So, but yeah, so they have 370 waiting on a wish in Memphis, and there's 58 chapters. I don't think she said how many kids nationwide are waiting on a wish.
No, she didn't.
Yeah, there are a lot of freaking kids. So, like 20 years ago, I when I was in school, like I said, probably about 20 years ago, we granted a wish for a kid. We did a bunch of fundraisers and all that kind of stuff at school. We came up with the money. We granted a wish. We did a wish celebration. We did all of that. And that's the reason why I went back to Make a Wish today, because of the thing that I experienced 20 years ago. It left that much of an impression on me that I went back to them now. So they didn't reach out to me. I reached out to them. In fact, I had to reach out to them 3 or 4 times before I ever actually talked to a person. Um, and so again, it left a lasting impact for me. I can't believe we shared this post on Facebook whenever we kicked this thing off.
Yeah, we already up to like 2 posts.
Yeah. Yeah. So we put this post on there. Start sharing it. That joker got shared 20 times on Facebook. I put it in fence groups. I put it all over the place. And you know how many people donated money?
Like 3.
0.
Oh wow.
So it got shared and liked and commented and all of this stuff, and nobody donated. And I think a lot of times we look at stuff and we're like, oh, well, I don't have an extra $1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 to give. But man, when the lady was here, like she even broke it down, and she talked about how if you can give $10, this is what it'll do, right? If you give $20, this is what it'll do. So it doesn't have to be a big amount of money, right? It can be anything. So, Anyway, thanks for your questions, Josh. Craig, good to see you. Thanks for stopping by with your dang. So now we've gotten through that. Let's get into the show. If you didn't listen, like I said, yeah, there you go, Craig. Everything helps. Exactly. We've been getting through some financial stuff. There's 2 episodes of that. So the 2 before Craig was on. If you want to go back and listen to them and get caught up and see what's going on, feel free to do so. We'll be here when you get back. So, but just to recap a few points really super quick. Just hang on one second. So we went over the basic layout and contents of a financial statement, right? So we actually shared one. If you listen to the podcast, you're not going to see that, but it is on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. You can see it on there if you want. But we shared a financial statement, talked about revenue, top line, total invoiced jobs. Cost of goods sold is the direct cost that it took to get those jobs done. Expenses, your indirect cost. And then net income is your profit or what's left over after all of that, right? So that's what we did. We also talked about cash versus accrual based accounting in the last episode. But that's kind of a recap, right? And like I said, I'm not trying to go back all through that. So if you want to check it out, it's there. So what are we going to talk about now? Man, now you are a financial basics amateurish expert. So what do you do with all this information? I've said this over and over and over and over again, and I'm going to say it again. Get an accounting system and start using it, right? Get QuickBooks is super obtainable. That's the one that I always reference. There are others out there, but QuickBooks is very easy. There's a ton of support. I promise you could go on YouTube and watch videos until the cows come home of how to do stuff in QuickBooks. That's a cool thing. And that like accounting world, right, is get something that you can find someone to help you with. So yeah, go get something, start putting your stuff in there, start tracking it, start going through it. Craig Eubanks has commented a couple times. He does it. We talked about that a little bit in the episode last week about how it's all tied into all of his stuff and he just categorizes it, right? All right. So there we go. Go track it. Go figure it out. Now, why do we want to do that? Why do we even care? Well, there's probably about a season's worth of episodes that we could talk about how we need to know what's in those financials. But we don't have a season. We have the rest of this time, whatever that is. So I'll give you an example of things that we do, things that I do here with the numbers that we're tracking, right? It's not about bidding jobs. It's not about any of that stuff. What I do is throughout the course of the year, I'm looking at stuff. And I don't really have like a set schedule that I do it on. It's not like I do it every Tuesday at 3 o'clock or anything like that. Like I just do it periodically. And so I'll sit down and I'll pull up reports and I'll look at our year to date comparison. So I'm comparing what we've done so far this year to what we did in that same period last year. And if, I might cut it off at the end of the month. Like if I was to go look at it now, I honestly would probably just start it up and say run to April 17th and I would compare straight up day to day. You could do it to the end of March. You could do it to the end of April. Like just depends on what you want to do. Right. But anyway, so what can we see by looking at that? Or actually, what am I looking at when I look at it? Right. So I'm looking and obviously I'm comparing things this year to what we did last year. So I'm going to compare the revenue, the cost of goods sold, the expenses, all of those things. So if I see an increase in revenue, then I expect to see a comparable increase in cost of goods sold at most. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention is percentages are a big deal, right? So whenever I'm looking at this year over year comparison and doing all of this stuff, anytime I look at a financial statement, anytime I pull my P&Ls or anything like that, I put percentages on it. I like to see my cost of goods sold is X percent of my revenue, right? That's a big number. That the percentages are important. Your margin is a percentage. No matter how you're calculating it and getting to your margin, like it's a percentage. So I like to look at everything in percentages. And comparing year over year, I do the same thing, right? I look at percentage increase or decrease. So if I see, man, we skipped last week. We did a replay last week. So Craig was the week before.
Yeah, two
Financials
weeks
was the
ago.
2 weeks before that.
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, Craig.
Yeah.
3 weeks ago, financial.
Yeah. So I was sick and I'm still trying to get over that. I'm trying my best not to sit here and cough and sniff and all of that in the microphone, but we have all this sinus stuff going on. So that's why we weren't here last week. Anyway, sorry. So when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at percentages, right? So if I see a 5% increase in revenue, I expect to see my cost of goods sold go up around 5%. Now, if I see my cost of goods sold went up 15%, well, immediately I know we screwed up something. And if I see my cost of goods sold go up 1%, I'm like, oh man, we did pretty good. What's the underlying factors in there? So then I start comparing my like labor line item, the material line items, things like that, right? And I'll dig a little bit deeper and kind of see, did labor decrease, did material decrease, like what line items in there decrease to lead to that increase in what I call efficiency. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but if you're yeah, drink it. It's hard to drink tea when I'm sitting here alone, Craig. There you go. I drank some tea for you. Sorry if you missed Craig's comment. He said drink some tea. So I call it an increase in efficiency, right? So if revenue increased 5%, cost of goods sold increased 5%, like they moved at the same pace. If I see revenue up 5% and see cost of goods sold up 1%, then I just kind of think like, oh, we were more efficient with our cost of goods sold dollars than we were in the previous period. So that's kind of what I mean when I say efficiency there. But yeah, so I'll kind of look at those comparisons, right? And so since I mentioned, hey, cost of revenues up 5, cost of goods sold's up 15%, right? Well, one of the things that some of you astute listeners might be thinking is that the material cost went up. So I just kind of want to let me just get on that for a minute, okay? So I think in the description I said my soapbox was going to be about customer service, but I decided I'm going to use this instead. So yeah, let's talk about material cost increase. All right. So I want to just point out something here, and it's a closely guarded secret. Not many people know this, right? But material costs have been increasing since the beginning of time. So I found some old quotes around here. If you don't know, my grandfather and his brother started Memphis Fence Company in 1971. And for whatever reason, we are freaking hoarders and we have stuff from 1971 still here. So anyway, I found an old quote one time that was where we bid some, I don't know, some sort of like 6 foot tall commercial chain link. And I think the price was like $2.40 a foot installed. Right. So $2.40 a foot installed. And so within the 50-year period, you can see how much everything has increased. That kind of gives you an idea, right? That wasn't from 1971. I don't remember what year it was from, but it was a long time ago. And that's a lot of increase since then. We're now getting $2.75 a foot for it. That's a joke, but nobody laughed. All right. So anyway, everything's always gone up, right? It's a part of what we do. And if you're the manager, then manage it. You got to manage these kinds of things. Everybody's dealing with it. We're all dealing with cost increasing fluctuations, right? Things always fluctuate and we always deal with that. Guess what? Labor costs have increased significantly, right? I think pretty well across the board. Material cost increase. Now, the concerning part is when you see explosive increases that happen overnight. Right? So that's a little bit of a different thing that happens and that is the part that gets a little bit concerning. But again, you're the manager, manage it. When we bid jobs, I like to put some allowance in there for cost increases. Like it's not much, but I mean, it's something marginal, right? So, hey, somebody laughed. Thanks. uh, but I do try to put some sort of allowance, right? I've heard, I don't know where this came from. I don't know if it's true or not. but I had heard that you could factor in like 5% a year for steel as kind of like the anticipated cost increase. Now, since COVID, I don't think that's a very good idea. Um, Maybe leading up to COVID, but I like looking at this report, and it's called the Steel Benchmarker, I think is what they call it. And you can go on there and you can see the history. In fact, let me see if I can share it with you right quick. Like, share my screen. Can I do this without it taking too long? There we go. So, this is the steel benchmarker. All right. And so, what I want to show you is this chart right here. So the left side of this chart is January of 2002, and the very right side of it is April 14th. So the top blue line is what we're worried about for steel prices here. Now, what you see is that massive spike right there. That's COVID. And you see how it spiked and then it came down and then there was a smaller spike and then there was a smaller spike and a smaller spike and right. So it's kind of almost like a bouncy ball. Right? So there was like that giant bounce, and then from there, it's just kind of like kept bouncing. So I don't know what that means, right? I'm not an economist. I don't know what that means. But what that means to me for sure is that steel prices have been fluctuating a lot since that giant spike in COVID. So there you go, for whatever that's worth. In fact, I think I'm going to put this link in the comments. I don't know where that'll go. So maybe you get it, maybe you don't. But uh there we go. So anyway, there's the link to that. If you want to go check it out, and post it on Facebook and YouTube. So if you're somewhere other than those two places, then you might be able to go to Facebook or YouTube and see it. Um, but anyway, so material prices have always fluctuated, right? They said 5% a year. I don't really know. You could probably study it. You could figure out if that's right or not. I don't really think that it's right because it's been on that crazy pattern, right? So what we're doing right now is we bid a job, we get a quote from a supplier, distributor, whatever, and those quotes will tell you how long they're good for, right? The quote might be good for 7 days, 10 days, 14 days, whatever that is. If we get a quote on raw steel, the quote is good at the time of writing and has been the case for several years now. So it's not anything new. Again, the explosive increases are the things that we're worried about, right? Not the increases. So it's yeah, but if you get a quote for raw steel from our steel supplier, the price is good right now. You order it tomorrow, we don't know what it's going to be, but here's the price right now. So what we do is we then take that quote that says the price is good for 7 days, 10 days, whatever, we use it to calculate the job, we bid the job, and we put that on our proposal. And now we say, hey, our quote is good for 7 days, 10 days, 14 days, whatever that is, right? And so I see your comment, Mark. That model's very close to the same with aluminum for us. I was going to look and see. I don't think they have aluminum in here. They have multiple different types of steel and different markets and things like that, but I don't think they have any aluminum. But yeah, we buy some aluminum. And I mean, honestly, no matter what I'm bidding, I get a quote on the material just about every time I bid anything. And when I say just about, I mean like 95% of the time I get a quote on the material. So then again, I put the quote is good for however many days, goes on the proposal, it gets sent out, right? So also, I have a little clause on my proposal. That proposal says, I've said proposal so many times. It says we bid assuming that we'll be able to order material immediately and then bill for stored materials. So what you don't want to do right now is you don't want to sign a contract on a project that's 2 years down the road and then order material in 18 months. And unless you want to play in that world, right? Like there are people who play in the commodities market, maybe is the right way to say that. And so, you could roll the dice and say, hey, no, it's going to be down. And you're going to watch the steel markets and you're going to buy when it's low and sell based on when it was high or whatever. I know buy low, sell high is the phrase, but didn't really fit. So, uh, but yeah, you can watch that, right? And you can time it if you want to. I don't really have time for that. I'm kind of busy doing all of my other things. So I don't really do that. But what I do is when they sign a contract, I want to get submittals out. I want to get them approved. I want to get material ordered as quick as I can. And I want to bill for that material and I want to store it somewhere. Now I have to have insurance to cover the material because once it's billed, it becomes property of others. It's no longer mine. I've billed them for it. They've bought it. It is now their property that is in my possession. So I have to have insurance coverage for that. So that is another little piece of it that just be aware of, right? And you might go look at the cost of that insurance and be like, oh, well, if the material cost goes up 10%, that's only going to cost me $500, right? It all depends on like the scale of things that you're playing in. So that that would be a decision that you would have to make. I can just tell you what we do, right? So I would say a good word of caution to use all of the time is don't get too excited and just sign a contract. It's really easy to get a contract and be like, oh man, that's awesome. And then you just sign that joker and you just go to town. Just cool your jets a minute, calm down, read the contract, and make sure that you're okay with everything in it. First of all, our default answer when someone sends us a contract is we need to verify material costs are still good. Before we sign it, we just did it. I don't know, a week ago. Someone sent us a contract on a job that we had bid 6 months ago, and we said, whoa, 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 whoa. All right, we appreciate that. We're super excited to work with you. But what we need to do first is we need to verify that material cost is still good. And we did it. The cost was up a little, it was a marginal amount. The cost had gone up. We went back to them, said, hey, here's your new price. They said, okay, cool. Here you go. Here's a contract for your new price. So you gotta do what's right for you. And a lot of time, not everyone who's on the other side of a transaction is experienced in dealing with a business. So depending on who you're having that conversation with is going to determine the difficulty or the complexity of that conversation. I promise you that steel benchmarker report I shared and put in these comments, I've used that steel benchmarker report in that conversation. I think I've told this story before, maybe, but I can distinctly remember a situation where we quoted a guy a gate and he's like, oh man, why is that thing so expensive? I did two of them last year and they cost 30% less than that and this and that. And I said, all right, hold on one second. I'm on the phone with them and I have this saved in my bookmarks. And so I pop right over, open it up, put it in an email, send it to him. And I was like, hey, check that out. And I was like, all right, scroll down to page 3 or whatever it is. I said, that's your steel market. Do you see where it was when you bought those other gates? Do you see where it is now? And the guy said, all right, I understand. And he signed the contract and sent it back. So find some tools, find a method to have those conversations. But I think a really important piece of it is to have some sort of evidence or something that you can use to support your claims. So if you're going to go to somebody and say, oh, well, material cost and availability and COVID and all these things, you got to have something to back it up, right? Like you can't just say that because you want to charge them more. Not that anybody would do that, but have something to support it is all I'm saying. And again, I'll just tell you, you're the manager, so go manage it. All right, sorry. We were talking about financials. So what we were doing before that is we were looking at our year to date comparison, right? So we're comparing this year to today versus last year. So if you remember, so long ago. I have a question that I put in here that I think is interesting. And the question is, how can you ever know if you're doing better or worse if you're not keeping score? Right? So just because you're doing more jobs, like let's say you have job numbers, which I hope you do. I hope you have some sort of numbering system that's associated with jobs that you do. But let's say you have job numbers and you're like, man, last year we did 50 jobs and this year we're already up to 37 and it's only April. Well, that's good. But did you do 50 jobs last year that were 50,000 a piece and you've done 37 this year that are 1,000 a piece? Right? So, granted, that's a drastic example, and that would be obvious if that was the case. But just because you do more jobs doesn't mean that you're bringing in more revenue. Certainly doesn't mean that you're making more money. So, having the information available to you is essential. It's essential. You got to have it. Uh, Now the part that I don't even like. So, good luck, everybody, because I don't even like this stuff. But we got to talk about expenses, right? So, you got to watch them. I personally tend to focus at least like 80 or 90% of my energy watching revenue and cost of goods sold. And that's not the way that I should do it. I understand. I'm just being transparent. I try to be real with everybody and I try to tell y'all what I do, right? So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But anyway, I spend a lot of time looking at revenue, cost of goods sold, driving revenue, focus on that. Let's go sell, 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 sell. Let's conquer the world, right? And I don't spend enough time watching expenses. So I think y'all can do better than I do, right? You can know that's a thing, and you can know Dan screws that up. So it is important to look at your expenses. You got to know, are they going up? Are they going down? Are they following your revenue? Like, how are those things trending? Let's see what Mark says. We're forecasting material cost out about 6 weeks. Nice. The time between quote date and ship date, our quotes are good for 14 days. So I think what that means is you're anticipating what the material is going to cost when you order it for a job 6 weeks down the road. So that's a little bit different than what I'm doing. But I mean, 6 weeks, like, it's not too terribly far. But also, you can get those phone calls that's like, hey, guess what? Material went up 25% last night. I hope you were ready for it. We've received some of those phone calls recently. Um, oh, and also, Mark said their quotes are good for 14 days. So I think it's important that everybody have something on your quote to clarify how long is it good for. You don't want somebody to call you back 8 months down the road and be like, hey, I need you to do this job. And you say, well, the cost isn't good anymore. And they say, why? You didn't tell me it wasn't going to be good. Why is it not still good? If I'd known that, I would have signed a contract back then. And then you got to deal with that situation, right? And how do you walk away from that knowing that you did the right thing and that you did what your customer expected? It's hard. So we're watching expenses. Are they increasing with revenue? Are they following the same trends? Are they increasing and your revenue's going down, your revenue flat and expenses going up? Like all of those things you can look at, right? So I think all of this stuff really just gives me a starting point, right? So when I see these trends going up or down or whatever they're doing, it gives me a starting point to start that investigation. So like I mentioned earlier, if I see my cost of goods sold is up, or I don't remember what scenario it was, right? But if I see that my cost of goods sold is not trending with my revenue and I look at it and I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And so again, that gives me a point to start the investigation. And then I can dive a little deeper into it and get as crazy as I want and go look at every paycheck if that's what I need to do to figure out where we're spending money. But it is a nice, easy way to see where you need to start and what you need to look at. And when you start looking, you're going to see weird stuff happen, right? It's an inevitability. Weird things happen. So you might look at this thing one day and be like, wait a minute, our uniform expenses went up 74% year over year. Like, what's happening there? And then you go look and you're like, oh, wait a minute. We bought these snazzy hoodies or we bought something that we didn't buy before, right? You can then dig into it a little bit and see what's going on. I would say one thing that I need to do, and I already admitted that I'm not very good at watching expenses, right? And I mean, whatever. I don't know. One thing that we need to do is be careful of the small increases that happen year over year over year over year, right? So if it's 5% a year, well, in 10 years, that turns into 55.1%. Okay. So a little bit more than 5 times 10. But if it's 10% every year, well, now 10 years down the road, you got 135.8% increase. So you got to watch those increases, right? Not that 10% is a small increase by any means, but the point is it grows exponentially. It doesn't just follow 10% from where it is today, right? Like that increase, if it's 10% on top of itself every time, is gets exponential. So that was what I was trying to say. But yeah, watch those little. Oh
That was
my
my shoe.
goodness, what you doing over there?
I was slipping.
Watch those little increases and try to make sure that nothing's sneaking up on you. All right, so I have this weird concept that I like to use for overhead. I don't know if it's right or not, but it makes sense to me and it might make sense to somebody too. So I think of my overhead as a bucket. Okay. And so if we do this, we all have a bucket. So imagine you got a bucket. And on January 1st, the beginning, we'll use the year as our period we're going to talk about. Okay. So January 1st, we start the year off and that bucket is empty. And the size of your bucket is determined by what your overhead is going to be for the year. So it takes some number of dollars to keep the doors open. You're gonna continuously spend money on marketing, and you're gonna pay your salespeople and your managers, and you're gonna pay insurance. Oh, don't be giving me that side eye over there. You're gonna pay your insurance. You're gonna pay the light bill, right? You're gonna pay all of these things, whether you ever sell a job or not. And so you have this bucket that's already set out at the beginning of the year. And if we never sell a job, we still have to deal with that bucket. So some people's buckets are bigger, some people's buckets are smaller, but we all have a bucket. So when I bid a job and I think about the margin, I imagine that entire margin is just going to get dumped in the bucket, right? So I'm going to take the revenue, I'm going to subtract the cost of goods sold, whatever's left over is my margin. I'm dumping that in the bucket. And we're not ever going to make any money until that bucket overflows for that period of time. So if it's a year, then that bucket has to overflow during the year. If it's a week, month, quarter, whatever it is, then our bucket has to overflow. And if the bucket doesn't overflow, we're not making any money. Well, so then we might have to scoop some water up off the floor from when it spilled last time and try to put back in the bucket. Well, you better hope it's not evaporated, right? Like you haven't spent it on something. You hope some water's still in the floor that you can scoop up. And now imagine yourself with a literal bucket that has overflowed and it's water standing in the floor around it. Now you got to get that water back up and put it in your bucket. So I go through this whole thing in my head, right? And it's going to take you a lot of time to get down there and try to get the water out. It because in my mind, it's not deep enough to like use a cup to scoop it, right? It's just like a little bit of little spritzes on the floor. Because I mean, honestly, that's what our profit is a little spritz from the bucket. So we might take some paper towels and kind of soak it up and then try to wring them out in the bucket or something like that. And it's going to take a lot of time. And you're going to lose some of that water because if you put it in a paper towel and you try to wring it out, guess what? You're not getting it all back out. The paper towel is not going to be dry when it's done. Whatever got soaked up and is stuck in there is gone forever. So, not the situation you want to be in trying to pick water up off the floor and put it back in your bucket, obviously. And silly analogy, I know, but that's kind of how I think of like a practical real world thing that describes overhead for me. So there's that. So when I'm bidding a job, I'm going to use our anticipated overhead percentage and desired profit or required profit to get a margin. Right. So I wouldn't be able to anticipate the overhead without knowing the trends. Is our overhead trending up at 3% per year? Well, now I know what to anticipate in 2025 and probably 2026, maybe. So I can look at those trends and I can get an idea of how big that bucket's going to be for the year. So I personally, I don't know how people do it that don't have this stuff. I can't imagine trying to bid a job and not having this information available to me. I've told this story, right? So when I bought Memphis Fence, the lack of accounting stuff that was here was crazy. There was nothing. Really, there was some stuff, but like it wasn't anything that you could go find out any information. If I wanted to know on April 17th how we compared to, the first however many days last year, it would take me till June 17th to figure it out. And at that point, it's all old information. So I've experienced it the old school way. And I promise you, it takes a while to get it set up, and it takes a while to get it where you want it, but it's for sure worth it. So for transparency, my margin does fluctuate depending on the job, right? It's not a set in stone number that I use every single time. Some people do, and that's okay. I personally do not. Man, you okay?
Yeah, it's my foot.
So it sounds like you're starting the crickets chirping thing. That's what I thought it was the first time, and I was like, man, that's kind of rude. So yeah, so my margin will fluctuate depending on what we're doing. I do have a minimum margin that we're not going to go below, right? So we're not going to go below what it takes us to sustain ourselves. But from there, the margin really what's fluctuating is the profit in a sense, right? So, um, but also what's fluctuating is how much we're putting in the bucket when we do the job. If it's a complicated job, it's going to take a lot of management and a lot of energy to try to get it done, and a lot of folks in the office spending time on that instead of bidding other jobs. It's worth more money. It's worth a bigger margin, right? Because those same, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 hours that I have to spend managing a project and doing all of the stuff to get that job done, that's time that I could have spent bidding other jobs, right? So you got to kind of think about that too. Um, and as far as like the margin numbers go, like I don't look at a big job and get excited and drop my margin down real low. Cause let's say you could do $100,000 job or you could do $10,000 jobs. Right. And yeah, the $10,000 job, sure, you got more money tied up in doing the administrative side of all that stuff. But like I don't really want to sacrifice a bunch of that margin because of that. I actually have the number. I know how much it cost for us to take a phone call, get their information, go out, look at the job, come back, quote the job, enter it in QuickBooks, do all of that, right? Like I've gone through that entire process and I have that number. So I know how to look at those that 10 at 10,000 versus one at 100,000 because I've done the calculations and I've figured that out. So there is some difference, but at the same time, it's not enough that I'm going to just like knock 10% out of my margin or anything. So easy jobs that we can send a crew out and we can knock out super quick. Like you got to take that into account. Um, those are going to be kind of more down towards my minimum margin, right? Is where the complicated jobs are going to be up above that. So if we're subcontracting something out, that's a whole different interesting thing. So we run in-house crews, but we also run subcontractors. I really think I might sneeze here in just a second. But if we're doing the subcontract crews,
Look at the bird.
I'm, look at the bird. Quit flipping me off, Ilaria.
That's what we say in Italian, not to sneeze, to just look up. So look at the bird.
Oh, look up. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Wrong kind of bird. So, yeah. So if we're subcontracting, that's a different way to look at things, right? Because now we have our in-house crews that are still going to be doing the normal jobs that they're normally going to be doing. And if we can land another job and we use a subcontractor that normally wouldn't be here, it's a little bit of like icing on the cake, right? So that maybe you apply a different margin there, maybe you don't. But all of that is to say, I can comfortably fluctuate that number up and down, and I know the minimum and I know where to be because I understand my business. I understand my numbers and I understand all of those things that go into accurately bidding a job. And I would suggest that everyone at least start studying that stuff, right? Because it doesn't come from any kind of fancy education. It doesn't come from books. It honestly didn't come from listening to podcasts because I didn't get to listen to this one though. That's why. Uh, it comes from me spending hours and hours and hours studying and looking at the real life numbers that our business did. And my father-in-law, who is a CPA by trade, he isn't currently licensed as a CPA anymore, but um, he was for years. And so he works here part time. And did you say sometimes?
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
I love that.
And Well, I mean, he's done his time, you know?
Yeah, no, exactly. I
And,
understand.
so he's been around here since I was negotiating on buying the business, and so I've picked up a lot of the stuff from sitting next to him and us going through the things and me being like, "Hey, wait a minute, what does this mean?" Right? And so I did have him there to kind of bounce that stuff off on, but regardless, it's been hours of looking at what this business has done for me to understand all of that. And, yeah, so but hey, anybody can do it. Let's see. Mark says forecasting accurate annual revenue is extremely important to make sure overhead percentages do not exceed the budget. If you miss hitting your minimum revenue forecast, your margin disappears. Right. So if you don't make the revenue, then you don't fill the bucket. Right. And that's not what we want to do. And so, if you don't know how to do any of this, don't fret, don't worry. You can call me and you can pick my brain if you'd like. My phone number's on the bottom of the screen just about, let's say, 46 weeks a year. Uh, I'm happy to talk to anybody. I know people say that kind of stuff, right? I'm not saying it to be nice because I'm not that nice. Like, for real, I genuinely mean any of you can call me. Call somebody else who knows. Doesn't have to be me. There's plenty of people in the world who know a lot more about this than I do. You can do some research, maybe pick a coach or a consultant, someone like Tony Thornton, who is one of our partners. Purple Coaching, the Mr. Fence Academy, I think goes into a lot of this stuff. Like there's resources that are out there that you can learn this from if you want to go that route. You could have a conversation with maybe Chat GPT or Grok or some other RI, AI about it. Uh, That I don't know. I use it a lot. In fact, I didn't use it today, but a lot of times I use it in preparing my agenda for the show. And but what I'm using it for is okay, here's the thing that I know, but like tell me the principles behind that or tell me who decided that was the way cuz I want to make sure that the things that I say on this show are accurate. I don't want it to be something that I've thought is right for the past 20 years and I come on here and say it and then somebody's like, "No, you're an idiot. That's dead wrong." Right? So I try to like do that kind of research at least. A lot of times I ask it for stories and for more context into stuff and things like that. But anyway, so you can use it. I would say if you're going to use it to make sure when you give it a prompt to tell it to include sources and don't make up anything. Okay. So those are the two things that I include. And sometimes I'll even say, hey, cite everything that you say. And so what it'll do is it'll go out and search all of everything. Right. I was asking it some questions about like crazy music journal stuff and all of this last night. Uh, and I said, "Did you find this on the internet?" And it says, "No, a lot of the stuff was I learned, right? It was taught." And so somehow it has this database of things that it knows that's not even like in the internet too. I don't know, but anyway, so it had a bunch of music publications and journals and stuff from textbooks and all of that it was referencing, but it couldn't give me an online source for it, right? It would cite the books. So like I said, you can tell it to give you a source or cite everything that it says. So I like to tell it to base everything on standard practices, especially whenever I get into like accounting stuff. So if I were to start from scratch today and set up a new QuickBooks, I'd probably go on there and tell it, hey, give me 15 expense accounts that I can use for a fence company. And I want it to be numbered and named according to whatever accounting practices or something along those lines, right? And it would probably spit you out a list just like that. Uh, so just be careful about what you do on there because there's a thing in the AI world called hallucinating, and you don't want it to hallucinate and tell you some stuff, and you take it as fact, and then you be in the situation I just talked about where 5 or 10 years down the road, somebody's like, "No, that's completely wrong. Where'd you get that?" But AI is a solid tool. You just got to be careful with it and kind of careful with your prompts, right? So, a few other places you might want to know your numbers, and then we're going to wrap this thing up. So, you might want to use your numbers with a banker. I've told this story before that we have a banker that we have a relationship with. And I believe that a part of the reason where we are today is because this banker came in and called me one day out of the blue, and we immediately started building that relationship. And he's been able to help us out multiple times over the course of history. Uh, and so I think it's very important that you have a relationship with a banker. I personally think it's important that you have a relationship with a banker that you can drive to. I like to find a local banker. I don't want to bank with any of these giant banks where you have to call in and talk to somebody and what's your account number? I'm not about that. Right. Like I'm going to find somebody local that I can work with where I can pick up the phone and call somebody, or we can go have lunch, or like I can, have that type of, uh, I don't even, I was going to say intimate, but that sounds weird, but like, I don't know. Somebody that I can have that kind of like relationship with, right? Somebody give me a good word that fits there. I don't know what. But anyway, and you need a line of credit. I don't care if it's $500, right? Or if it's $500,000 or whatever it is. You need some kind of line of credit. So find you a banker, build a relationship, get you a line of credit. You don't have to use it, but you can let it sit there. I think our line of credit, I think it cost me something like $350 a year when I renew it. And if I never use it, I never pay interest or anything, which right now I try my best not to ever use it because interest is ignorantly high. Well, I mean, again, if you look at history, interest isn't that wild, but in my lifetime, interest is pretty wild. So I try not to use my line of credit on anything, but I do have it sitting there and it costs me a few $100 every year to renew it. Not a big deal, but it maintains that relationship because I know at least once a year, and you should be doing it more, but at least once a year, I have to give the bank all my updated financials and all of that stuff. And I go sit down and I spend an hour talking to him and going over stuff, and we sign the renewal and all of that. Right. So there's a relationship with a banker. It's also essential. Ooh, what if we just did an episode and it's like the things that are essential?
That's good.
And I just sit here and tell everybody what they should be doing.
Yeah, it's like the beginning. It's the start.
Oh, gosh. Sorry, I had to have another drink of tea. All right. So, insurance audits. I don't know how everybody's insurance set up. I know this works different, but for us, we get audited. And so we get audited for our general liability insurance and for our workers' comp both. And by having all of this information available to us, it makes it a lot easier to print off a report, save it as a PDF, and submit that report instead of having to spend a week of like going back through bank statements and receipts and trying to pull all of this stuff out, right? And trying to make something up. So we have it here. Bada bing, bada boom. Here's what it is. Here's your information for your audit. Again, tried to look for a better word, but there wasn't one in the Rolodex. So yeah, that's a good thing, right? It makes it a lot easier. I also think it's important to have a relationship with the insurance people. I personally do. And I talk to them because I'm one to come up with some crazy ideas. I mean, I'm due for one right now. Honestly, it's been a few weeks. So I like to come up with these crazy ideas and call and be like, hey, what if we became the first fence company to install a fence on the moon? I think I'm going to pursue that. I'm going to call up Elon and be like, hey, man, I want to go put a fence on the moon. What can we do? And like, that's not a real example, but I will come up with. Alari's looking at me like, yeah, right. I heard you talk about that last week. No. So I'll come up with these ideas, right? And I'm hyper cautious when it comes to insurance. And so anytime I think about getting into doing something new or opening another business or doing anything like that, I'll call them. So I'll call my banker, talk to him about it. I call my insurance people and I talk to them about it because I want to make sure whatever I do, I'm covered. So having that relationship and knowing the people is a big deal. Once again, my folks are local for insurance as well, and I know it's 2025. I understand. Uh, in fact, I understand that in the past 14 days, people have listened to this podcast. Uh, all in the US. So shout out to everybody there. Thank you. Um, Barstow, California has the most downloads in the past 14 days. But we have had listeners download the audio only podcast in Sweden, Brazil, UK, Canada, India, Mexico in the last 14 days. No, Italy. Your family didn't listen. So I understand it's 2025. We can do stuff across the world and we don't have to be local, but I think it's important to have a relationship with local people. Uh, so there you go. What if you sell your business? Being able to do that is you're going to need some financials to give them. If you just go in there and get you got tax returns, you're not going to get top dollar for your business. Uh, it's just going to be the way it is, right? You're going to need financials and you're going to need to be able to show them supporting documentation and back all of this stuff up. And it's going to be a whole thing. So having a good set of books is really good for that. Contractor's license. If you go to renew a contractor's license, get a new contractor's license. You want to increase your monetary limit on your contractor's license. Any of these things, you got to have financials to go with that. So you need them everywhere. Some general contractors even require that we submit financials on certain jobs, and they want to look at your current financial situation and make sure that you're fit to do the project that they're looking at doing. So they don't want to hire someone and they go out of business in 6 months and they're stuck trying to clean up that mess, right? If they want to hire somebody to do a bigger project, then they want to make sure that the company's solvent and they're able to do the job. So sometimes we have to submit financials there. Okay. Now we can take a deep breath. We've made it through that. So that's pretty much the end of it. I think I'm going to go on vacation now because I've worked so hard. It's been some hard work. It really has. I'm just kidding. No, but that's the end. So hopefully that kind of like gives you some information about how to start creating financials. Maybe it's even motivating. Maybe you're going to go do it. Right? Maybe you've already been doing it and you're like, man, will you shut up freaking telling me to do something I've been doing for 30 years? My goodness. Sorry. It's really a big deal. I've done some like, I don't know, a little bit of like consulting type stuff here and there. And a lot of people that ask for help and they don't have any of this. And I think that's kind of what like the root of me wanting to really hone in on get financials is because I've seen how many people out there don't actually have it, right? So I think that's where it all comes from. It's given me some passion, some, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, some fire, some spark, right? About this stuff. And I really think that everybody should do it. And I really urge you to get on it. And yeah, so I think in the future for our financial stuff, I think we'll get into maybe like balance sheets, assets, depreciations, liabilities, things like that, because that is the other main component of your financial situation is being able to look at a balance sheet. So you got a income statement or your profit and loss statement, whatever you want to call that. And then you also have a balance sheet, right? So the balance sheet's a whole nother thing. I don't know if I immediately want to turn that page and jump straight into it. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see how I'm feeling next week. But anyway, so that's what'll be next here on Dan's School of Amateurish Finance. So thanks everybody for tuning in again. If you're here in the U.S., awesome. I don't know who's in Barstow, California, but they're the number one download of the podcast in the past 2 weeks. So shout out to you guys. And then everybody that's international, I think it's cool, right? It's a pretty cool thing to know that people. I mean, there's people all over the world who at least downloaded the podcast. I don't know if they did it accidentally. They might not even speak English. Obviously, some of these countries they might not. But anyway, yeah, thanks everybody for listening. Again, I stress, if you want to hear something, if you want us to talk about something, if you want to be a guest, all you got to do is let me know. We're pretty open to anything. As long as we can do something that's going to deliver content along the lines of the content that I think is important that we delivered, then we're good. So, all right. And that I'm going to hit end. Thanks for being here. Thanks for saying great stuff as always, Craig. Happy to have you here. Thanks for stopping by. And everyone else who engaged, thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.